So now, if you're working with 1 volt, you can take 100 ohms right there and get 10 milliamps of current if you know you're going to get 1 volt across that resistor right there. That's the same as 0.01 amps. When you do the math, you do it in amps. 1 volt divided by 100 ohms is 0.01 amps, and that's only 0.01 watts. Resistor won't get very hot. Quarter watt resistors can handle that pretty well. With 2 volts now across a resistor, you'll get 20 milliamps of current flowing. So you got 2 volts divided by 100, 0.02 amps right there. Again, it's 0.04 watts, much lower than the 0.125 watts you want to stay below when you are using a quarter watt resistor. So now, let's look at what happens if we bump up the voltage to 3 volts across a 100 ohm resistor. We can get 0.03 amps, which is the same as 30 milliamps right there. That's the voltage across the resistor. That's how you set current through it. And so 0.03 amps, you multiply that times the voltage, 3 volts, we got 0.09 watts right there. That should be a W. Now, that's getting, fairly warm for a quarter watt resistor. So that's kind of the limit we're going to set. So if we're working with 4 volts, that's going to go across the resistor right there. Then if we use a 150 ohm resistor, we can get 0.027 amps right there, 27 milliamps of current, which is, a decent amount for low power circuits. And we stay below the 0.125 watts. So now, if we are working with 5 volts right there and we want to put a resistor with that 5 volts across it, we could use about 220 ohms if it's a quarter watt resistor. We'll look at the math there. 5 volts divided by 220, about 0.023 amps, 23 milliamps. You take that the voltage, 5 volts, times that current, we got about 0.114 watts. So a little bit below the 0.125 watts we want to stay below if it's a quarter watt resistor. Now, if we got to put 6 volts across that resistor there, and it's a quarter watt resistor, probably should use like 330 ohms. It will allow 0.018 amps, 18 milliamps of current to flow through it. But you multiply 6 volts times that current, you get about 0.109 watts. So a little less than the 0.125 watts that we want to stay below. So now early on, when I was making videos, I knew I was going to be putting about 7 volts across a quarter watt resistor. So I was using 470 ohms. And that usually gave me about 0.015 amps of current, approximately, 15 milliamps of current. You multiply that by 7 volts, you got about 0.104 watts. So that's fairly warm, but still, perfectly safe right there. If I got 8 volts, then I'm more likely to use at least 1,000 ohm resistor right there. Of course, it's 0.008 amps for each volt across a 1,000 ohm resistor. You got 8 milliamps of for each volt, you got 1 milliamp of current. So 8 volts, you got 8 milliamps. Makes it pretty easy. So you multiply that times the voltage, and we could still go up a bit in voltage, 0.064 watts right there. So now, 9 volts is still a decent voltage to put across a 1,000 ohm resistor when you're using a quarter watt resistor. Again, for each volt across a 1K resistor, you got 1 milliamp of current, 9 milliamps, because we're using 9 volts. Pretty straightforward. Same as 0.009 amps. Multiply that times 9 volts, 0.081 watts. Still not getting too hot if it's a quarter watt resistor. We can go up to 10 volts. Again, it's not changing much now because current's really not changing all that much. Because we're using a 1K resistor, a little bit high value right there. But in any case, 0.01 amps, of course, 10 milliamps, 0.1 watts. Still not getting too hot, but it's, fairly warm right now. So now when it comes to quarter watt resistors, we're made our way up to 11 volts right there. Again, 1K should work, but it's going to get quite warm. So again, for each volt across a 1K resistor, 1,000 ohms, you got 1 milliamp of current. 11 volts, 11 milliamps of current. So 11 divided by 1,000, 0.011 right there. You can see that the wattage is about at the top of our recommended maximum. So absolute max is 0.25 watts, but you want to stay about halfway below that. We could even go up to 12 volts. I don't really recommend this anymore, across the 1,000 ohm resistor if it's a quarter watt. Again, 1 milliamp per volt, because it's 1,000. 0.012 amps in this case. So there you can see it's above 0.125. You know, it's going to get quite warm. Even for 11 volts, you definitely want good airflow. So it's a little higher than I recommend.